All right, I want you to put yourself in this situation. You have a friend calling, like your phone starts vibrating. Just picture that noise. Feel the noise for a second. But you're not sure if you should pick up or not. Because if you know you love this person, like you care for them a lot, you've known them forever, but you know if you pick up, it's likely going to be a long conversation about that one issue. You know, that one thing that she always calls about, or he always calls about, and they always make a really big deal out of it, and you don't think it's that big of a deal, or you've already told them what they need to know, and they won't do it, and so they're calling, and it's still vibrating. That whole thing, and you're just like, I have plenty to do. I'm really busy tonight. I don't want to deal with this tonight. But then on the other side, and this is all happening within 2 or 3 vibrates, you're thinking, but is it the loving thing to do to ignore them? Like, I don't want to ignore them. The Christian, like, if I ignore them, they'll likely know. They know what I'm doing. They're going to know that I ignored them. Then they're going to be offended. Then I have to deal with that conversation on top of the other one. So what do I need to do here? And you have to figure it out. Any of you been there? A couple of you have been on the other side of that phone call. If you're honest, we're like, why aren't they picking up? Why do they always, why does it have to ring 3-4 times or go to the voicemail? You might have some honest questions to ask yourself, but here's another one. On the other side of things, you're in a place where you really could use help. Like you're dealing with something that's heavy and difficult. You know, man, it would mean a lot to have a close friend to talk to, but you don't reach out. You just, you're like, I'll figure it out. It's going to solve itself over time, or it won't be as bad, or you just play that game where you know you could really use someone's help, but you don't want to bother them or inconvenience them in any way, so you don't call at all. Like we've played both sides of that game. I'm sure you have in some ways. And those things, what I want to talk tonight about are boundaries. Those things are boundary issues. And not dating boundaries. We already did that. We're not going to talk about dating for a little bit now. You're welcome. But even though these boundaries can play themselves in that, but this is an issue having to do with what's mine, what's my responsibility. What's mine to deal with and what's not. What challenges are mine to own and which are others that we're called to tackle as a community. I want to talk about that tonight. And any confusion about responsibility and ownership at the core really is a boundaries issue. We don't know where to draw the line. Now, this in our culture is exacerbated because we live in a culture where more and more we're taught that other people, it's other people's faults for the situation we're in. You know, we were raised in a place, in a society, in a culture where all these things, where we find ourselves, the thoughts we're having, the decisions we're making, it's not our fault really, it's someone else's fault. No, I think that's not healthy. But that's really collectively what society has been pushing on us. Even decisions we make, we were pressured into. And that doesn't help things, but add to it also that we're Christians. And so as Christians, this could be more confusing because we're really called to love selflessly. So where do we draw the line? We ask questions like this. Can I set limits on my relationship with someone and still love them? What are legitimate boundaries? What if I upset someone by the boundaries? Is that a worse sin than just giving in over and over again? How do I answer someone that always wants my time, energy, love, money? Why do I feel guilty about setting boundaries? Are they selfish? Those are questions. Just give me a quick head nod if you've ever asked yourself any of those. And in community, close community, it's easy to. So what I hope to clarify tonight, what I want to talk about is what is our responsibility and not. What's my duty to others, especially as a Christian? And how do I respond to someone when they want me to deal with an issue that's not really mine to deal with? Or it's going to cause me to fumble that which is. Like, how do we handle and balance all that? So again, boundaries are the line that help us answer that. And boundaries are pretty clear in a lot of other areas in our life. So if you own property, there's boundary lines. And in fact, you can put up that picture. Do you have it? This is just a random boundary line plot that I pulled off the internet. But those different lots right there. They delineate, they make it really clear whose property is whose property. There's a boundary line. In fact, you could pay money to make sure someone comes out and surveys it to be so precise on where your property, where your responsibility begins, and where another person's ends. So at my house, I have the incredible blessing. My wife and I purchased a home some time ago. The weeds at my home, unfortunately, they're on me. I hate picking weeds. They just keep growing back all the time, over and over again. But it's on me. If there's a plumbing issue, I had a pipe break last year. And my water bill, I found out because my water bill was $300 more than it should be. That wasn't great. On me. Whose fault is that? It's not really my fault, but it's my responsibility. It's on my property. Now, there's this tree in the back corner of my house. It's this giant pepper tree. I really like pepper trees when they're in the middle of a field far away from my house. This is not. This is on the corner of their property, and it leans over my house, my area. So every chance I get, I go and I stand right up to the boundary line and I look up. And where those leaves go over the boundary line, I chop them down. And it's annoying because then I have to fill my green trash can, all this stuff. But once it crosses that line, it is very clear. It is mine, and it is no longer theirs. But I can't cut the whole tree down because I like my freedom, and I don't want to go to jail, right? That's against the law. That's where you would get in trouble. But I bring all that up because that's really clear and it defines things. But when it comes to relationships, we don't have giant lines that pop up when we're in the middle of a conversation that tell us to stop talking or to clarify things. It could be more ambiguous. If I told Chris here, I said, all right, look, I take you to a piece of land and I say, you need to guard this land with your life. And I'm going to hold you responsible for anything that happens on this land. But I don't tell him the boundaries that he's guarding. That would cause a lot of problems. He's either going to think he's guarding something way too big and cause issues every time someone looks in his direction. He's going to go after them. Or he might be like, nope, this square foot right here that I'm stepping on. That's all I care about. And then it wouldn't work. You have to be clear on what is your responsibility and not. So just like a property is defined by boundaries, we in many ways are defined by our boundaries. Where do I begin and where do I end? What is mine? What is my responsibility? And if we could figure that out, then it should be freeing. Because I know what I need to take care of. And I know what I can get involved with, but what I don't have to. What I could figure out in that time situation, in that time. God defines himself in this way. He defines himself as a distinct, separate being, and he takes responsibilities for the decisions he makes, the covenant he enters into, right? God guards what he allows into his yard in heaven. He allows, he keeps evil out. He allows those who love him in. And God has set up distinctions. Even within the Trinity, there are boundaries. So for you and me, we have a few different ones, right? Your skin is part of that. Your skin is you. So there's some, you're in charge of, your body in that way. That's a clear boundary. If I say, man, Chris is really getting under my skin, I'm letting him do that. That's on me. That's not, I have to set up some boundaries here. I'm calling out all the Chris's unintentionally. But I want to figure out, let's really get into Scripture. Let's figure out the ambiguous part. So open your Bibles to Galatians 6. Here's how the Bible, I believe, describes the distinction. Galatians 6, verse 2 says, bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks he is something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. So if anyone's like, man, I don't need anybody, I'm all that, they're deceiving themselves. That's not how we were created. Verse 4 goes on and says, but each one must examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone, and not in regard to another. So verse 4 is saying, look, let me step back. Verse 3, we can't say, hey, I don't need anyone. Verse 4 is saying, but we need to be careful not to look around and compare ourselves or compare our work and get caught up with all of that, because then we won't do the work that we need to do and then be successful in that. Finally, in verse 5, for each one will bear his own load. Here's where I want to spend a good chunk of time. Verse 2, bear one another's burdens and therefore fulfill the law of Christ. Verse 5, for each will bear his own load. Those seem to be contradictory. Are we supposed to bear one another's burdens, or are we supposed to bear our own load? And if we look into it right there, the words for burden and load, they mean something fairly different. Galatians 2, carry each other's burdens. Burdens in that, the Greek word for burden means excessive burden. Burdens that weigh us down, that can crush us. I want you to think boulder. That's a burden. In fact, who here is fairly strong? Who you're like, I lift weights. Victoria? No, your hand was up. Here, can I, will you humor me? Come on up. Come on up here. All right. I have here a flower plant. The church doesn't have any boulders around. I'm sorry. But Victoria, can you do me a favor, and can you just lift this up for me? Yeah, just real quick, just lift it up. Yeah, give it a try. No, oh, you can, yeah. Okay, you move it, not lift it. All right, someone else. You can grab a seat. Thank you so much. Who else wants to? Yeah, come on up. All right, now I do want to tell you this. I put it up here earlier with someone else, and I still feel it a little bit. So don't hurt yourself, but you can go on stage. Go ahead and, climb up here. And oh, well done. Well done. All right. Now, that was kind of weak. You can give it up a little better in that. Kai. So you can lift it. If I asked you to walk around the church with that, you're good. No one would want that. I can move it a little bit, like I can lift it up and stuff, but there's no way I'm actually carrying that. There's a difference between lifting and carrying. And if I wanted to carry that around, it would crush me. It would break me. And there's things in our lives that happen to us that are heavy like that. There are tragedies that come out of nowhere into our lives, hit us, and they're heavy, and just on our own, they would crush us. And you belong to a community because you are not meant to carry those things alone. There are crises that come that you were never meant to carry on your own. And some of you've tried that. And so just like Kai, he can carry this. And here's the deal. Some of us are stronger than others physically. The same is true emotionally. Some of you can handle a tragedy or a crisis better than someone else in this room. That doesn't mean you still need to handle it alone. That doesn't mean you're called to. You could lift this. Victoria, you can move it, right? Slightly different. Neither of you are meant to carry it. Because God has put us in a community, and it says here, carry each other's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. Burdens are big. They're too big for one person to carry. This is what Jesus did. This is the example he set. Remember, boundaries in heaven, he decides who comes in and who stays out. But when it comes to carrying burdens, he decided to leave heaven to come down and carry our burden of sin because it was too heavy for us to carry on our own. We couldn't do it. And that's the example we have. There are people around you that need help carrying burdens, and we need to be in a place as Christians where we do everything we can to be there for those people in that time. It goes on, though, and in verse 5 it says, "For each one will carry his own load." And that word load means cargo, or the burden of daily toil. I want you to think backpack in that. There's boulders, and then there's backpacks. And a backpack, like if I came in here and I had this backpack on, and I'm like, "Hey, Nate, this is yours," and I make Nate carry my backpack, you guys are going to be like, "Oh, this pastor thing's kind of going to his head," right? Their backpacks are daily toil. This is something that is significantly lighter. And in it, there's a possessive nature to this. It's the burden of our daily toil. We have a responsibility to carry our own load because these are the daily things that we're called to take care of. They're our responsibility. And there's a couple things to note. You guys have been in school before. You know some days your backpack's light when it's like one of those cheat days, like the day before Christmas break, and you don't actually do any work, so you just empty your backpack. And there's other days when it's heavy. And for us, what that looks like your daily responsibility, the things that you're called to carry daily, some days it is a heavy backpack. But you are capable. You can do it. And there's other days when it's like one of these, I asked my wife to borrow her, where is it? Fanny pack? Other days it's like a fanny pack. I don't think you'll ever see me with one of these on. Kind of wish I could pull it off. I don't think I can. Not going to try it. But there's days when it's more like this. Now, here's the deal. Problems come up when we treat boulders like backpacks. When we treat burdens like knapsacks, the things that we're supposed to carry. Because then you get crushed. You get hurt. And in that, there's also, you could get bitter. You can get angry. You're carrying something that's not yours to carry alone. On the other side, a lot of issues come up when we treat backpacks like boulders, where we try to go to everybody else and say, "Hey, I need you to carry this and this," and it's your responsibility. It's the things that you're called to take care of. And then if you do that, you're going to make someone else miserable while you aren't growing strong. You're not taking care of the stuff you need to do, and you're being irresponsible. So those are the two differences there. Burdens and backpacks. Bear one another's burdens, and each person's responsible to carry their own load. And I want you to think these boundary lines are not like stone walls. If I was angry with my neighbor, I could put on my boundary of our property a 5-foot thick stone wall. Like that, there'd be no problem with that. But when it comes to relationships and burdens and different loads, we want to make sure that we just have a row of gates. We want something that we can go through as needed. And I'm going to explain a little bit about that. Let's go to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10, we're going to read in verse 30. Jesus replied and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. By a chance, a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side." You go to the next. "Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, he was on a journey, came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own breast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii, that's 2 days' worth of wages, and gave them to the innkeeper and said, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you.' All right, so you guys have heard this before. This man gets beat up. Now, the man's left half dead on the road. The Samaritan walks by, and there's a boundary here that he has to cross because the Samaritan, and it seems like this is just a regular Jewish man, they don't work well together in this society. They don't like each other. You guys have heard this before, right? And so I'm not going to elaborate too much, but he has to know that that's not a boundary that God has put up. It's one man has. And so he's going to cross that. But is the man that got beat up, is he responsible for his problems? He's not responsible for that man. But if he's a believer, I want to argue he's responsible to the situation to help him. And here's what how I want to separate those two. He's not responsible, like it's not his fault this man got beat up. It's not on him because he did something wrong. Or that man that's on the ground can't go after him, this Samaritan, and say, it's because of you that I'm in the position I'm in. None of that. Right? And we don't know. There's tons of other things we don't know about this man and his situation and why he got beat up and all this stuff. That's neither here nor there. But the Samaritan, if he's a believer, if I was there, I want to be in a place where I can bear his burdens. Because, man, this guy's now carrying a boulder. And even within that, I need to learn how to set up boundaries, right? If he is here and he says to the innkeeper, here's 2 denarii, and I want to, I'll come back and pay for anything else. And then this guy wakes up in the middle of that and says, wait, Samaritan, you can't leave me. You got me here. You have to stay here. And the Samaritan feels full of grief and guilt because he was going to leave, and he decides to stay. And because he stays, he loses all the business that where he was going and all of that. Then all of a sudden, the Samaritan would be in a place where he's like, man, you made me lose out on where all this other wealth I could have done, right? We do that. We start playing the blame game whenever we let our guilt decide whether we should do something or not. And instead, we need to go to the scripture and say, all right, is this mine? Is this something that I'm responsible for? Is it something I'm responsible to? Is it a knapsack or is it a boulder? Is it something that I can help with? And here's the catch. I think the Samaritan was in a place to help with this man's boulder because he took care of his own knapsack, because he took care of his own backpack. If I'm not responsible for the things that I need to carry daily, if I'm not taking care of my daily load, I'm going to find myself in a place where I'm either immature or I'm in debt or I'm hurting. I'm not in the place I need to be because I haven't been responsible for the things that are mine to be responsible for. How many irresponsible people do you know are able to help and bless others freely? Those things don't usually go hand in hand, but think about the most generous people you know, the people that carry boulders for other people. They usually have their own life put together. So the challenge here for us is this. How are you carrying your backpack? How are you carrying the load? What are the things that you have to take care of? And are you doing that well? And then what are the things where you as a Christian can come and give life, like breathe life over to someone and really support them and carry their boulders where that's possible? I want to, look, we need boundaries because if I take too much from others, take on too much from others, I'm going to miss out on my responsibilities. I'm not going to do those well. If I take too much from others, I'm going to prevent those people from doing what they're called to do. But also, if I let others take too much from me, then I'm hurting them and myself. I'm inhibiting what they're going to be able to do, and I'm not building up what I'm capable for. All right, so think for a second in your life. Can you think of examples of times when you've done that? One of those, where you've taken on stuff that you know you shouldn't take on. Can you think of times when you've let people take things from you that were your responsibility too? So what is in our backpack? What's ours? I want to tell you that you're responsible for your feelings. You can't blame that on other people. From anger to compassion, that's on you. You're responsible for your attitudes and your beliefs. You know, Jesus called out the Pharisees. He said, you're neglecting the commandment of God. You hold on to the traditions of men. He was calling them out. This is your belief. This is what you're doing. We're responsible for our choices. One of the fruit of the Spirit is self-control, not others' control, right? I'm not responsible for other people's choices, but I need to have self-control. I need to decide. And then in that, I'm responsible for the repercussions of many of my choices, my behaviors. So that's like, I'm going to reap what I sow. In fact, if someone comes in and prevents a consequence that I deserve because of seeds that I've sown, then they're hurting me in the long run because they're trying to step into something. I'm responsible for that. I'm going to reap what I sow. That's a biblical principle. I'm responsible for my gifts and talents. Matthew 25. Remember that steward who hid the talent? And the master came back and said, you knew that I was a shrewd and wise master. Like, he held them responsible. We're responsible for our desires, for our love. We're responsible for our yeses and our nos, James 5. Like, all of that's us. That's on us. And again, in our society, in our culture, especially for young adults, more and more and more, people want you to believe that it's not your fault if you are prone to shoplift. Like, you shouldn't be punished for shoplifting because of the society that we've built. You shouldn't be punished for signing a contract, school loans, even because of the society we built. You shouldn't be, and it just goes on and on. There's things that you might have a chance to get out of, but ultimately it was decisions you made. It's your backpack. Someone else shouldn't bear the load for decisions that you made. But then for others, we need to make sure that when it comes to crisis and tragedies, we take care of those things in our backpack so that when we have friends who lose loved ones, we can be there. When we have friends who experience tragedy, we can be there. When we have friends that there's just sudden heartbreak or challenges or accidents. You know, we've had that in this room. We've had car accidents where people are left in positions they never thought they would be in. And that's where community comes in. I even think about that physical picture, and there's stories and stories in old times when, man, you were responsible for your own field. You're responsible for your own livestock and your own animals. But if your barn burnt down or your home burnt down, you could just look up story after story online of communities coming together and rebuilding each other's homes. That's not your property, but that's a crisis. And we do that for each other, but we can only do that if we're in a place where we've taken care of our stuff and we're in a position where we can come help one another. All right, I want to challenge you with one other thing, and then we're going to wrap up. I want you to ask yourself, which type of person are you in this list? A compliant person struggles to say no to the things that are bad for them because they don't want to offend anyone. It's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. That's a compliant person. And so they're struggling to set boundaries because they don't want to hurt someone. They don't want to offend someone. An avoidant person struggles to say yes to the help they need. They don't want to be needy. So they're like, I'm not going to take that handout. I got to do it on my own. I got to figure it out. That's the avoidant person. Are you one of those? What about this? A controlling person expects others to say yes. So they don't respect other people's limits. And so they often push the responsibility onto someone else. And if you don't say yes, they're gonna try to make you say yes. I think kind of manipulative in that. A non-responsive person is critical of others' needs and often feels incompetent themselves. So they're like, oh, they don't really need it. They're not there, but there's really an insecurity there. Can I tell you a silly story I just noticed last week about myself? My birthday was last week, and I don't like bringing it up. I don't know about that. Not worth coming. I don't like talking about it. Like I like where's KJ knows, like I like keeping it on the DL. And as I'm reading this book, and you guys, if you want to find out more about all of this, I really highly encourage you to read this book. I've found it really helpful. I realized about myself, I don't like bringing up my birthday because I hate missing your birthday. And so I don't want people to celebrate my birthday because I don't want to forget yours. And there's a little bit of insecurity that I don't want you guys to highlight anything about me and not feel like and miss out. But that's kind of this non-responsive, critical of others' needs because there's some incompetence about yourself. Like this book helped me realize that about this, that there's insecurities there, and so I set up things. I refuse things because of that. And I don't know where else that might play a role in your life, but I want to be real secure about who I am. I want to be secure about what I'm called to do and take care of so that I could do those things. So I could check them off, so I can be good at it, so that I can then step into your life if I need to help carry your burden. And my prayer is this, that you'll do the same. I want this group to be a really responsible group that is known for having their stuff together, that is known for, when it comes to the things that you need to carry daily, when it comes to your attitudes, your actions, like you're going to not blame other people. You're not going to be angry and bitter at other people. You're going to just say, all right, this is where I'm at. This is what I need to do, and I'm going to take care of it so that you can be in a place to really lift up others, or you can be in a community where you haven't burned bridges. Here's the other catch. Sometimes if we don't take care of this, we burn so many bridges that when something big does happen, we don't have as many friends around us as we wish to carry the things that we need to carry because we didn't take care of this. I do not want that for you. And so that's why we have to work out these two things. So can I have the band come up? I want to encourage you again. Christ sets the example for us in this. Jesus has set boundaries. He says, hey, this is what's acceptable and not. This is who's going to make the cut and make it into heaven. And if you don't believe in me, if you don't give your life to me, you're not making that cut. And people want to say, man, that is unloving, that is cruel, and all of that. But Jesus knows that one, he is a holy and perfect God. That standard is, like, that's his standard. That's who he is. And he knows that we, man, are so blessed when we know him. And because of that, he broke that boundary of heaven. He stepped onto earth. He bore our sin. He bore our burden, the thing we could not bear, because he wanted to do everything he could to make sure we had access to getting into heaven. And so not only is his example that we're called to follow, but it's by his Spirit that we're strengthened to do these things and to love others selflessly. And so let me just say, and then we're going to pray, Let's push to be a community that if someone sets up a boundary, and I said that boundaries can be gates, in that some of you are like, but I really struggle with this. Some of you are thinking, man, I'm not even clear, not even beginning to get clear on what's mine to carry. You can seek counsel for that. You can go to someone else and say, hey, is this a backpack or is this a boulder? And like, if you come to me and you ask me that, I'm not going to tell you if it's a backpack. Hey, it's a backpack in here. Let me carry it for you. I'm going to let you do that. But it's okay within community for us to work that out, to seek counsel. But and for some of you, there are types of things that you are meant to carry that you haven't had to carry. Maybe you have parents that have just taken on that load for you. Maybe you've been in a position where the government has taken some of those things for you. So you don't have to, like, that might be a process of you figuring it out. But let us aim for this. Let us aim to carry the things God has called us to carry. To take responsibility for the things that we're called to be responsible. So that we can be in a place where we can bless others selflessly, whatever comes. Will you guys pray with me? Lord, I pray that you would help us to see the example that you've given us. And that it would encourage us in how to respond and what we need to do. God, if we look around, as it said in verse 4, if we look around and get caught up in this world, it's easy for us to play this blame game or comparison game. Lord, you know that there will be always someone we can find that seems to be thriving, even though they're not doing what you call them to do. And Lord, may you help us to not worry about that. You are a God of justice. You are a God of truth. And so may we, because of this life that you've given us, may we aim to work hard and walk in a manner worthy of the call that you've given us. May you help us, God, to take on the things that we need to bear, our daily loads, trusting that you see it. May we work hard for your name and for your glory's sake. And then, God, I do pray this. I pray that through that you would put us in a place where we can help others. Lord, in this room, there are people here who you want to use to bless others financially. You want to raise people in this room up so that they can provide. But God, there's people in this room, Lord, that you want to raise up so that they can bless others and carry others' burdens when it comes to emotional support or counseling or prayer and interceding. So we trust you in all of that. May this community, may you mature us, may you build us up in all the unique ways you would see fit, so that there is not one boulder that is carried on just by someone else alone. Thank you.